Once again, good morning. I have something to read to you. Each person has a musical song in their bodies. This is the hum from inside that you can feel when things are really down. My grandmother had a hum, never a song. She would hum sitting in her rocking chair and I would listen. That was the song of her soul. These are words from Tina Turner, so I thought we would begin our service on a grandmother's wisdom with that this morning. And now please join me as we ring the Tibetan bowl as a call to service, listening as the sound fills the sanctuary and then recedes back to the silence. This is the time to quiet your heart to all we can bring to each other.
This is a song, I'm sure everyone here knows this song. When I was a little kid, my mom would sing this to me, and now that she is a grandma, she sings it to my niece. Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where you ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn shall be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis the gift to be simple, 'tis the gift to be free, 'tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn shall be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Thank you, Michael. That was sweet. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalists of the Chester River. We welcome those in the sanctuary this morning and those on Zoom. Welcome to this church, which is relevant in our lives, active in the world, and grounded in love and justice. Perhaps you join us this morning seeking community, seeing a familiar face, enjoying some really good coffee. Perhaps you are seeking comfort after a difficult week, or seeking a deepening spirituality. Wherever you are on your life's path, we welcome you this morning. My name is Annie Lavin, and I'm your service leader. We welcome Laura Powell-Haney to our pulpit. Her sermon is titled, "The Grandmother's Wisdom." She reminds us how in the sovereign indigenous nations on this continent, it is the elder women who are and have been keepers of history, of community ties, of family heritage, and tribal history. Grandmothers, and many of us in here share that dear title, also hold the family, the history close to our hearts, and then in turn, pass it along to the next generation. Laura will also speak to the shameful role that even those in our UU faith had in the mistreatment of Indians with residential schools and colonizing behavior. We'll end with that important question now: what is our role in justice work? Laura has been a museum guide, a reporter, an editor, a religious educator, a chaplain, and now an itinerant preacher. She completed her Master's of Divinity at Meadville Lombard Theological School in May of 2020 and seeks ordination as a Unitarian Universalist minister. And we very warmly welcome you, Laura. Our accompanist is our wonderful musician, Michael Casey. And gratitude to the tech team and all those who help with today's service. Your names are in the order of service. We have a couple of announcements. We need coffee hosts for next week and the following weeks. Please sign up. UUCR needs a creation care champion. Think of Green Sanctuary. We've had that in this church for years, and now we're looking to energize it again. Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake is now helping more than 170 congregations to form their green teams. So Linda Dutton, the go-to person, will have sheets, and she'll give you more information about some of the meetings coming up and how you can become involved. And now let us begin as we honor the stories of our ancestors whose strength and wisdom beats in our own hearts. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for generations to come. Let us worship together. We will now light our chalice. The words are in your order of service, and Laura will lead you.
Yeah. Will you join me? The fire of love, burning deep in every human heart, calls us to awaken. Awaken to the work of justice. Awaken to the work of compassion. Awaken to the work of community. For in this time of human suffering and exaltation, we are called beyond awakening into action. May the chalice flame we now light guide our hearts in service to a greater good that holds all living things in its holy embrace.
For opening words, many of us have had grandmothers in our lives. Some of you may be even married to one. But this morning, I'm talking about the memory of our grandmas of youth. If you were lucky, you had two. Maybe she wasn't even your relative, but surely someone's, and maybe the little lady down the street, who to our very young eyes was rich in years and filled with wise sayings, if we were only able then to hear them. Hopefully you have memories of being loved in the way that only a grandmother can. The role of grandmother is that, and so much more, because she's also the keeper of history and memories and times and places, increasing our sense of being loved, our sense of belonging. This morning, we turn a lens to the role of grandmother in Native American civilizations across the continent, across the centuries. We can learn from these cultures that give grandmothers their place of honor and speak to their dignity and the power in their role. There is a book titled Grandmothers of the Light. It's written by Paula Gunn Allen, and I wanted to include the following excerpt because she writes so well of the changing roles of women as we spiral through life, through the phases of life, like the changing phases of the moon, on our way to the wise and honored role of grandmother. She says, we begin our lives walking the way of the daughter, a time for learning and gathering experiences in the shelter of our parents. We move to self-reliance, when the necessary task of this age is to learn who we are in the world. The path brings us to the way of the mother, a time when her spiritual knowledge and values are called into the service of her children. And then, Allen tells us we are brought into a circle wider yet than our own children, wider to include the well-being of the community. With the years, the net stretches still larger and larger. The circle bends round again, and grandmothers walk the way of the teacher, becoming models for younger women to follow. And in this age of fullness, she tells us, our work is still not done. The spiral widens farther and farther so that the sphere of the wise woman is now beyond herself, beyond her family, beyond the human community. It is now embracing the planet, mothering the earth. Her unique role in the fullness of time is noble, sacred in her outstretched arms as she holds creation. We are now having our first hymn. It's in the gray hymnal. It's number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. Please stand as you are able.
Our dual reading this morning is titled Stone Mother by Tanaya Wonder. I was born in the desert, learned to cherish water like it was created from tears.
I grew up hearing the legend, the lesson of the stone mother who cried enough tears to make an entire lake from sadness. From her we learned what must be done, and that the sacrifices you make for your people are sacred. We are all related, and sometimes it takes a revolution to be awakened.
You see, the power of a single tear lies in the story. It's birthed from feeling and following the pain as it echoes into the canyon of grieving. It's the path you stumble and walk until you push and claw your way through to acceptance. For us, stories have always been for lessons.
I remember my grandmother so well. She was versed in dirt, the way the earth clung to her hands as if it was part of her. We come from the earth, so she tended the seeds as living beings, planted her garden full of food, traditional to the land, and handled them with care. Every tree, plant, rock had a spirit, she said. Hear it. And I listened.
Our Mother Earth holds our histories in her dirt. But today, she burns not in the traditional ways once taught, controlled and deliberate. Today, she burns desperately for all to resist fossil fuels, the drilling, and the black snake named greed that swallows everything.
When you lose something, you hope it will be found. When something is stolen, you want it returned. We've had our land stolen and we're losing it again unless we all take action for the climate to change, stand with us as accomplices. Follow our lead, for we have always been well-versed in survival.
We were shaped by fire, made from lightning and dirt-covered hands that know when to ignite healing. Now is the time. Let us not drown in Mother Earth's tears. Mother Earth has a spirit, and she's asking us to listen.
May it be. And now we have acknowledgments of the heart. This is that special time in the service when we share parts of our lives so we get to know each other better and we can share in each other's pains and celebrations. I'm going to light the first candle this morning for our friend Cynthia, who has a birthday coming up. Now, we all have a birthday, and we don't always light a candle, but Cynthia's is another special one. It's 101, I believe. And so we will start with this wonderful candle, and then please come up and you can light the candle for your personal joy or concern.
I'm lighting this candle today because October 8th was my mother's birthday. She passed away in 2001. She would have been 82 today. So thinking of Mom.
Okay, I'm lighting a candle today for the invasion, the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. We all know that's been going on forever and ever. It's intractable. They're so stuck. And it was just with such sorrow that, heard the news yesterday morning that Hamas had invaded the Gaza Strip, and then Israelis are retaliating, loss of life, loss of destruction of communities. And so it just keeps going on, and just, it's just been my thoughts. So I want to light a candle for hopefully some kind of resolution somewhere in some time.
Many of you remember Tom Allen and Margaret and Tennant, who were in church here, friends of ours. They moved out to Taos, New Mexico. And you may have met Billy Allen. Billy was Tom's mother. She was about this tall and just a fireball. She died at 98 last week. And about a month ago, the whole Allen clan visited with us. And Billy came up from Richmond and to attend a grandniece's wedding in Pennsylvania in a custom-made pink suit. That was she was something else. Anyway, I know many of you know Tom and the family, so hold them in your hearts.
There's so much rotten going on in the world today that I thought of something good today. And I was going to be on time because I was the greeter. And in my mind, this face popped up, and it was Diane Turpin. And if she's out there, we should say hi because she does watch us. And I thought, a just happy thought was Diane. Haven't seen her in a long time. but we miss her. And if she's there, we're saying hi.
I'll light the final one for any joy or sorrow that remains unspoken in your hearts. Blessed be. And now Marilee Tussick will come forward to tell you about the special collection this morning.
Good morning. How many of you have seen the movie Love Actually? Remember where the guy stands in the door with some big poster board and says he loves the lady, but he can't say it out loud, so he just has big poster boards. So I have something to say, and I have little poster boards. I think of this as the beginning of our social justice season, because the Social Justice Committee every year sits down and tries to figure out which topics matter the most, and then we frame those topics around outreach offerings. And this year, one topic came up that was new. Normally, we fundraise around a local group and a local issue that affects us here. But one fairly passionate person, I think that was Kathy Lee, when we were talking, what matters this year, said, democracy. And I jumped on that democracy train, and we decided to have an outreach offering and a time to consider the threats that we have at least recently perceived to our democracy. And when we were trying to figure out what organization to offer as a fundraising thing to bring our attention to the issues of democracy, we did not find local ones. In fact, there's a good handful of new organizations that have arisen in the last 6 or 7 years, roughly, to the newly perceived threats to our democracy. And we picked one. So they're all new and they're all experimenting around with different things. But we liked this one, and we liked it so much that we asked you to watch a video. I don't know if any of you did. It was in Reflections. And we're going to have a discussion after our service, just a brief one, less than an hour. And we're going to watch this video together. And what this organization does, and its name is represent.us. You can go to their website and watch the video. What they try to do is to talk simply about complicated issues, because it's really hard to solve some of the threats that are coming for our democracy because the issues are complicated. So they've really crafted a simple way to talk about it. And as we were listening to the grandmother's wisdom, wonderful words this morning, I thought, that's what grandmothers do. They think of everyday ways to talk about things that sometimes feel overwhelming and complicated. So in the next 3 minutes, because I've only got 3 minutes, I am going to try to give you a demonstration of how to talk about a complicated thing simply. I'm going to step away from the mic and I'll try to talk loud. So pretend we're having an election as to what dessert we're going to have after lunch. And by the way, if you join us in discussion, you get to eat the lunch, but if you don't join us in discussion, you don't get to eat lunch. Let's pretend we just have one flavor, okay? And 26% of us like strawberry, 35% of us like chocolate, and 39% of us like vanilla. In our current system, who wins? Vanilla. But there's another option. In our current system, 39% of the people get a voice, and 61% of the people don't get a voice. The winner takes all. And in fact, when they talk about elections, that's what they call our current system, the winner-take-all system. It forces us into two tribes, because let's face it, we all know strawberry, which might be also called the third party, isn't going to win, so half of us don't even consider strawberry. So those new and marginalized flavors don't even get into the discussion because they're never going to win. So you have to just go with one or two. It forces us into the us versus them. The system itself does that. Instead, there's an option, and Represent Us does a wonderful job of explaining it, called ranked choice voting. And people say it's complicated, but it is not complicated. Here's vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. This is your ballot, right? You just choose first choice, second choice, third choice. That's not a complicated thing to do. And we all have our graduated choices. When we think about it, elections were like, well, I like her, and he's okay, but I don't want anything to do with that person. Okay, so graduated choices have meaning. They represent us too. When a ranked choice system is used, and strawberry only gets 25%, 26%, the person with the least votes is dropped out. But the second choices of the strawberry voters get added up again. And they are put into the chocolate and the vanilla. So vanilla was leading, but more people from the strawberry voters liked chocolate. So chocolate ends up with 53 and 48. The result of this is that more of our preferences count. We aren't herded into a system that eventually ends up with an us versus them, Hatfield versus McCoy. And the candidates are not chosen by a base, and they have to govern over a larger range of supporters. They can't just pander to the chocolate lovers. They have to think about the strawberry second choice people too. So we begin to listen to each other better. This is a system, and what Represent Us, which we're fundraising for, does, is asks us to look at the systems that make us less democratic. Interesting side note. In the Alaska election about a year and a half ago, they used ranked choice voting. And that meant that a woman of Native descent ended up as a representative because she got a chance. Because they let strawberry on the ballot. We end up having a wider range of people that represent us. That's what your offering is for this morning. And we'll be reminding you again in reflections all month long. Thank you.
So after service, there'll be that light lunch, and then coming back into the sanctuary for a discussion, a debate.
Either that or we'll watch it in the smaller room. We've got the projection and the video all set up for you.
Okay, thank you. So, back to grandmother's wisdom. In your order of service, there is an insert, and there's a picture of a grandmother with a little one in her arms, and underneath of it are some beautiful words to a song that we're going to be playing. It's a YouTube song, but it's all about the wisdom of the mother, the child, the community. So as I pass the baskets, they'll play that song. You might want to follow along with the words.
It's Holly. Holly near.
Pardon me?
It's Holly near.
Dolly.
Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the First Nations, calling out the messages of the earth and sky, telling us what we need to know in order to survive. Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the old women, calling out the messages of the moon and sea, telling us what we need to know in order to be free. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the young children.
Listen to the voices of the young children, calling out the messages of the heart and soul, telling us what we used to know before the lies were told. Listen to the voices of the young children. Listen to the voices of the young children. Listen to the voices of the old women. Listen to the voices of the First Nations. Listen to the voices of the living.
And now if you turn your page over, there's a responsive reading that we will do. We'll start on the right-hand side of the sanctuary, and this second stanza, every other one will be on the left. It's entitled Remember. Remember the sky. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You were evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, we are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people, and all people are you. Remember you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember all information is growing is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember. And now we have our sermon, A Grandmother's Wisdom, from Laura.
This is really a series of stories. Some of them are true. Some of them are remembered. And some of them are just wisdom. And I'm timing myself because also sometimes stories take on a life of their own. Our first story is a true story. This comes from the journal Science, the August 5th, 1887 issue. This is a portion of one of the articles. The American Unitarian Association is one of the religious bodies of the country which, since 1874, has had charge of the education of the Indians. This association has nominally been in charge of the Utes. The attempt to establish an industrial school for the Utes failed, however, because of the frequent removal of the tribe. Its opposition to all forms of civilization, and the lack of sufficient government support. Mr. Henry F. Bond, a Unitarian minister, the representative of the association, then turned his attention to the Crow Reservation in Montana. The Crow tribe, which numbers about 3,500, of whom about 800 are children of school age, have never had any settled missionary or educational work done among them, except a small government school at the agency. The tribe had been originally assigned to the Methodists, but no work has been done by them, though they, as well as the Catholics, have recently secured mission sites on the reservation, which will soon be occupied. The Crows have always been the firm friends and allies of the whites. They have resisted all overtures from other tribes to join them in hostilities and have always been ready to take up arms against any tribe, even their own friends who made war on the whites. It is perhaps for this very reason that they have been for so long neglected by missionary bodies, whose efforts have been directed to the Christianization and civilization of those tribes from whom most danger was to be apprehended. As a natural result of this neglect, the Crows are among the least civilized of all the tribes. They cling to their wild ways of life and are reluctant to settle down to habits of industry. They are sensual and immoral in their practices. But the universal testimony of the 12 agents who have been appointed to the Crows in the last 18 years is that they are docile, good-mannered, and not inclined to intemperance, as are most other tribes, and that they are faithfully endeavoring to adapt themselves to their changed conditions. They have agreed to take up allotments and to build houses on their homesteads and cultivate the ground. I need to stop there and take a breath. And think of this, because I did the math. 1887 was 136 years ago. So just before Cynthia was born. We won't throw that at you, Cynthia, but we'll give you another 25 years there. 136 years ago. My friends, that is approximately 4, maybe 5 generations. Do you remember the idea, usually attributed to the indigenous peoples of this continent, that we must consider the impact on our environment for 7 generations? Consider the impact of Indian industrial schools for 7 generations. There are still at least 3 generations to come impacted by Indian residential schools. And I want to begin with that story, that true story, framed as it was about how unindustrious the indigenous peoples were and how uncivilized. Because that was a moment in time when children were removed from their families, sometimes forcibly, sometimes the parents and grandparents had been convinced that this was the best thing for the children to be able to integrate into the society that they were thrust into. Horrible things happened at those schools, and I will not detail them this morning, but you know that. Those children then became parents, perhaps if they survived, and then perhaps also grandparents. But just because you grow up, and you know this too, what happened to you as a child does not disappear. What happened to those children was an erasure, and not just attempted, an erasure of their identity as Crow or Ute or any of the 500 nations within this continent. It may have been couched as a thing to make sure people were contributing to society, but we know what that was. It was a systemic erasure of an entire culture, cultures, and peoples. And that impact is still being felt now for maybe 5 generations later, because it meant that that first generation subjected to the Indian industrial schools, who became parents and then grandparents, had had their culture ripped away from them. So there's a generation of wisdom keepers that had lost that access to that wisdom and that way of life. And that keeps trickling down over and over and over. And I had to take another breath when I thought of that. And then I talked to my husband, who is Seminole and Choctaw. He is both healer, wisdom keeper, and warrior, trained that way since he was 7 years old. Because the wisdom of the grandparents, in his case, especially his grandfather, but also his grandmother, was not completely gone. Now, the Seminole people are one of the few nations within this nation that were never conquered or decimated. Now, they did get moved around a little bit, but they still have their space, their land, their sacred land in Florida. And I began talking with him a little bit more each day that we were together, until I went to seminary and I took a class on feminist and mujerista and Latinx theology. And I wanted to do a project for my final project about Indigenous women. And I said, what should I focus my final project? Because as you can imagine, there were lots of things. And the first thing he said, without hesitation, was on missing and murdered Indigenous women. Now, if you think those two things are disconnected, the idea of the impact of the Indian industrial schools and the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women, please think again. Because it's another erasure of the humanity of people. So I nodded simply and quickly, yes, that will be the focus of my project. It meant a lot of looking for information for myself and asking him some things. And sometimes he would share with me his grandfather's stories. If you ever get to talk with him, please do not ask about Andrew Jackson, unless you have several hours and a very strong constitution, because they remember. They remember. Charles would often talk about the grandmothers specifically, the wisdom keepers, the informal judicial system. They were paying attention to how you behaved. And also decision makers. If there was a dispute, it was the group of grandmothers that you went to solve that. When he went to Standing Rock, the Oseti Sakowin camp, the first thing he did in the snow and the ice and the cold was find the tent where the grandmothers were, because they had their own tent and everyone knew where to find it. And he went and introduced himself and offered his service, because that is what you do for the grandmothers and for the children. And when they give you a task, you do that task, or you come back to them. I remember him returning from Oseti Sakowin, more himself than he had been since we got married. He had been returned to his roots and his culture, and he was better for it. It was through those grandfather and grandmother stories that Charles shared with me while I was working on this project. Again, mostly from his grandfather. He spent a lot of time with his grandfather. That I began to understand the true nature of evil that the United States, even before it became a nation, perpetuated on the original inhabitants of this land. It continues today, both in a continual threat to indigenous lands. We still want what's underneath those lands. We still think we have the right to it. We still think it has no value until it is built upon or dug up. But there's also the threat to the people themselves, and especially the women and children in both Canada and the United States, who often will simply disappear. Disappear from their homes and their communities and their places of work. Native bodies, like native land, are still considered the property and right by white, and I'm going to use this word and I mean it, the white colonizers, including my own family. This is hard to hear. It is hard to learn about, but can you imagine living it? Three other themes emerged through all my reading and research and learning for that project in seminary, and I've continued with that up until today now, even. This is also important and part of the grandmother's wisdom, that indigenous spirituality cannot be separated from living and breathing. It is not Sunday morning only. It is every day, from the moment you wake up until the moment you go back to sleep. Land and people are deeply intertwined, or were before it was all taken over and over again. And three, and this is the heartbreaking part, family relationships are paramount. And family often means whoever needs to be living under your roof right now. So you may not be a blood relative, but you are still family. So when people go missing like that, it's more than just oh no concern. It is a blow to the community itself. This is heavy stuff for a Sunday morning, and I know that. But there's hope, because the indigenous peoples themselves know the damage that has happened because of that kind of long ago Indian industrial school issue. They have created their own healing circles where the people who were either there or were children of people who were there or grandchildren of people who were there, who still experience that harm and that loss, can come together and talk about it. There is such an explosion and renewal of traditional ceremony around healing and community and culture. That gives me hope. There's a whole system for people, the people themselves, to report missing folks. So instead of relying on other agencies, and that's a little bit of an issue because of reservations can be federal, or they could be the state, or they could be local, and sometimes everybody drops the ball on that. But the Urban Indian Health Institute has created a database so that the people themselves, if someone goes missing, can enter that information so it can be followed. I've talked about reservations and I've talked about the importance of the land, but I want to throw something else out to you too. That the largest number of indigenous people now live in urban settings. They've been pushed off the reservations as well. That doesn't mean they're not still those indigenous people. But it does mean that if they disappear or are killed, that they are often misidentified as Latinx, or as African American, or as white. And that makes it much harder for them to be found by their families. As we talk about heritage this month, know that that whole system of the Indian Industrial School is part of our Unitarian and Universalist heritage. But it doesn't have to be the final thing. We are a people of faith who value justice, equity, and compassion. So we can raise these issues and keep talking about them, and don't let them get swept away or underneath or disappeared. We can work toward justice, perhaps as land acknowledgement as a first step, but it's only a first step. It's not enough. There's more that needs to happen, and that can take the form of reparations, perhaps monetary. It could take the form of returning land to nations that have been robbed of it. It could be, if that's not practical, if your own house is on land, which it probably is, because, that was once a native nation, you could pay rent for that to support a tribe. There are stories and stories and stories. So I'm going to ask you, the next time you are talking with someone who's indigenous, that you listen to the story. Just listen. Because it's not just made up, it is a lesson. It is a lesson. And with humility and open ears and a tender heart, you may hear it too. It could be in the wind, and it could be in the waves. It could be in the sky, but it's all around you. Those are our grandmothers as well. So don't forget to tell your stories too. Blessed be.
Thank you, Laura. And now we have our second and final hymn. It's 1051 in the Teal Book. It's We Are, and we're going to really need a lot of voices for this one. We've heard it before, but just a couple times, but the lyrics are really beautiful, so we will join together. Please stand as you're able. I think any discussion we would have with Laura would entail a lot more depth than we have the time for right now, but I hope you'll join us for coffee afterwards and we can begin some conversations with you. That would be wonderful. So we have our closing words. One of the old ones stood up in the morning light and spoke to those who had come back to the river. Now we have come again to this place, and it is a good thing. My life apart from you is not as strong. Yes, I have danced and I have told stories at my own fire, and I have sung to all 6 directions. But when I'm with you, my friends, I know better who it is in me that sings. Reverend Barbara Parson. And now, are you going to play?
Do I lift it off or the
Yeah.
first week?
Really?
Do I lift it off
Yes, thank you all. Please join me as I extinguish the chalice. The words are in your order of service. Extinguish this flame, that not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Lifted up, love bless your way. Light starlight guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day. And the postlude.
This is a piano arrangement of the second movement of Dvorak's Symphony Number 9 in E minor, nicknamed the New World Symphony.
Thank you, Michael. So let us all gather up the goodness of this hour together, taking it in our own hearts and sending it out into the world for someone who may be in your heart and mind this morning, that we may all be led to the light, not a single one left behind. Have a wonderful week.